Okay, so I'm Richard Esplin. Who has attended Lightning Talks before? Okay, so don't need as much explanation. This is a good session for before lunch because you know exactly when it will end. So that's nice. But it is auto-advancing slides, 7 speakers, 5 minutes each. Each speaker gets 20 slides, 15 seconds each. So that's almost 40 minutes of content in the 40-minute session. So we're really crisp. The gray sign warns the speaker that they have about 30 seconds left. When it gets red, they have to sit down, and the next person's getting up. So we're going to move really quick. If you have any questions, these speakers would love to answer them after the session. So there's a resources side. We'll post this at some point, and I have to sit down.
Hi everyone, my name is Iván Arroyo. I am Senior Software Engineer at Zaizi, and I'm going to talk about sitebul import from CSV. You can find me in Twitter, Iván SCN. Okay. Migrate from other system. It's a common case, have a client that needs migrate from his system to Alfresco. So if this system have the content not well organized and the content is about a different topic, we can say it is a system poorly distributed regarding to content distribution. So we can solve it in Alfresco using the site. The site is a project area where you can share content and collaborate with other site members. So if we have a lot of content and we need to migrate them of a properly way, we should create multiple sites. Multiple sites allow share and collaborate content, content well organized and structured, better categorization, controlling content visibility, rich content by thumbnails and media beware, etc. So how create multiple content? We can do that manually, but it's not the idea. Of course, automatically, yes, but our tools called sitebul import tools. What is this tool? This tool that lets you import sites dynamically, performing operations on sites such as create, update, or delete. To perform this operation, the sitebul import tool reads from a CSV file. And how does it work? Let me show about physical architecture and logical architecture to explain it. About physical architecture, we have some components, the create site webhead create component that receive and validate the CSV file. This component called the create site service component that use the Alfresco site service to create the site. If any error happens, throw it by the logger. The next component is the top folder component that creates the top folder such as document library. And finally, the manager component that set the person or person as site managers of the sites. About logical architecture, start the process, invoke the custom webhead script, read the CSV file is valid, not end the process, continue processing each line. If there aren't more records, end the process. If yes, process each record, asking if the site already exists. If not, if yes, end the process. If not, create the site, and continuing creating the containers as document library. Continuing with the process, add the person or person as site managers if the person exists. If the person exists, if not, end the process, and if exists, add the person as site manager and complete the process. This is a sample CSV file. We have the operation column, add, delete, or update, the site name, the site type as public, private, or moderate, the short description, and the manager, who is the site manager of the sites. Now I'm going to show a simple demo. I'm going to show a sample CSV where I going to create the site. As you can see, the operation is add. It is a bit small, okay? And the name of the site is site1. So I'm going to execute the web script by curl. Okay. You can see in the log the site has been created, and if I go to the site finder to find the site, you can see the site has been created. Okay, this is the site. And now I'm going to do the opposite operation, that is remove the site. I'm going to change the operation of the CSV file, put in the remove operation, the delete in this case. And if I call the web script by curl again, you can see the site has been removed. Now I'm going to go to the, which is very slow now, the video. 1 second to the okay. Put the curl call, okay, the site has been removed, and if I go to the site finder, the site has been removed. Conclusion, this is an automated process. We save time because you don't need create the site manually and avoid manual errors by humans. That's all. Thank you, everyone.
Hello, I am Andrea Agili from DrWolf, a small software company in Italy, and we try to create good software products. And I'm going to talk about Docker. How many of you know what is Docker? How many of you use it in production? Oh, great. So, what is Docker? It's a way to let your environment not move. You move your application from Linux from your box to another box, and you have always different results. If you Docker is like a virtual machine, but is a smaller way of containing things. Usually, you run only a single process inside Docker, and it's very lightweight compared to traditional virtual machines. You have images, which represent the state, the whole data you have in your environment, a full operating system that you run inside your Docker. They are built in layers, so you start using, let's say, a basic Ubuntu, you add your packages, your customization, and you save that image. Then you write on a higher layer. And then with this configuration, you can go back and forth from a layer to another. When you start an image, you have a container. A container is, you can start, stop, restart, is the running side of Docker. It's like a running operating system. For Docker, all containers are equal. Docker doesn't care if it's a web server, a full Alfresco installation, or just another thing. You start, you stop, you monitor it, you move it from a server to another. Docker has the idea of registries. You push your image on a registry. It can be public, it can be private, or you can just save your image and give it as a file to your collaborators. The idea of Docker is you can commit, push, pull, and tag your images. I think you are familiar with these terms. So it's easy to have a state, go back, add your customization, and come back. This is an example of how to start a simple container. You install Docker, then you run it, and it has to download the image, and you are in there. You see this PS, you have only one process, this is your PS. You can, for example, when you are inside your container, you can install something, you can exit, you can commit, and you have another image. And then you have the basic image, a new image with your customization. You can automate this with a Docker file. You say from you start, your commands. We use a volume. We'll say in the next slide what it is. You expose your port and you say which is your command to start when you run the container. The idea is you can have external data in your container. Your container should contain only logic. For example, the alf data of Alfresco should stay in a separated volume. This is how you can build a simple Alfresco image. It's not recommended for production use, but you can install in a standard Linux machine. You run the installer, you install in opt Alfresco, etc. You copy the installation directory in a running container, and you read this. We set up a simple Git. You can clone the repository. You edit your properties, you build, and you have an image with your configurations. You can start it right away. Docker offers some interesting functions. For example, you can point to a host name on your properties, and when you run another container with your database, you can link it inside your container. Docker will link your container within. This is how you should build your images. You start from scratch, you add your base, you add your specific customization, and then you can fork from a test configuration like this, for example, with everything inside, also some sample data, also database, or a production configuration, which is pretty different usually. You have, the way, for example, you can have one container for database, one container for Alfresco, or more containers for each of your Alfresco node, a container for Solar, a container for your front end, external volumes for the data, and the logs, for example. So you can advance in deployment, you can share the test set, you can develop in the same environment. I don't know if you ever tried to use video encoding on Linux, on Mac, is always different. And so in production, it's easy. You have image, you run it, it's already ready to run. You can select which service run into, you can move containers between another. And there are Alfresco images made by the guys Maurizio Pilito and Gabriele Columbro. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Ishara Fernando. I'm a senior Linux sysadmin at Zaizi. So I'm here to explain on how to use Nginx to speed up Alfresco. So we should focus on some considerations. That is, we should first consider like caching stuff. Caching maybe on the browser or maybe on the disk. And also web page loading speed. So if there's an Alfresco cluster, we should consider to load balance between the cluster, between the two nodes within the cluster. So for that, we have various options. By default, we use Apache, but you all must have heard Nginx, Windows IIS, etc. So after some research, we have found that Nginx is the best for Alfresco because it's in normally Alfresco is static content, and Apache is best for dynamic content. And for each HTTP request, Apache creates a new process ID, but Nginx doesn't. And also, the hardware is independent for Nginx. For Apache, it relies on the underlying hardware. So this is a comparison between Nginx and Apache. So as I told you, this is how a reverse proxy on Alfresco works. Nginx will be running on 80 and 443, and Alfresco will be running on 8088-443. So all the traffic from 80-443 will be forwarded to the Alfresco ports. This is a typical configuration of reverse proxy. So when you type / at the end of the URL, it will be automatically rewritten to share. So if you want to access share, the second block, when you type / at the end of the URL, it will be proxy pass to 8443, which is the SSL port of Tomcat /share. Likewise, the same with Alfresco as well, where 127.0.0.1 is the loopback address. So normally we have a lot of production environments in the cloud, so we should make sure all the traffic is encrypted. So we should force rewrite all the URLs from HTTP to HTTPS as follows. So why cache content for Alfresco? We have two options, maybe caching content maybe on the browser. That is, we can force Nginx to cache some content on the browser or maybe on the disk. So the next slide will show you on how to cache content on the disk. Here we give a key name such as like alfresco -cache, and this space size taken is 1.5 gigabytes, as you can see. And this slide shows on how to cache. We can force the browser to cache JS, CSS, GIF, such as images and everything on the browser. And the second one shows on how to cache document thumbnails on the Nginx server disk. Next thing we have to consider is we have to consider web page loading speed. So there's a module called page speed for Nginx. It's a custom module. We should rebuild the Nginx RPM using Nginx page speed. As you can see, the first diagram shows before we configure page speed. Second one shows after configuring page speed. As you might notice, there's a very vast improvement in the performance, the voice low grade and everything. It's just a matter of putting one line called page speed on within the HTTP block, and then just reload Nginx service, and you just have to verify the voice low grade and everything. You will notice the performance. Okay, so for production environments, normally we use Alfresco clusters. So we should consider load balancing between the clusters, the nodes, and we should know how to failover. So Nginx can do that. But in that case, Alfresco supports sticky bit sessions, which is available only in Nginx commercial version. So, but there's a hack where we can use IP_hash algorithm, which is in Nginx. So, as you might not know, we can load balance email as well. Incoming IMAP email in Alfresco using Nginx as well. We had to use PHP FM server plus there's some Nginx configuration as follows. It's just one small mail block, as you can see. Port 993 is the listening port of the mail port of Alfresco, as you can see. So maybe after you have upgraded Alfresco, you all might have noticed, this is Nginx failover configurations. You just have to put down, let's say server node 1 is under maintenance. So what you can do is you have to notify Nginx that it is down and reload Nginx service. So maybe after you upgrade Alfresco, when you in the browser, you might see some images and everything is scattered. So what you can do is just remove the disk cache, Nginx disk cache, and reload Nginx service. So that is it from my end, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.
Test, okay. Okay, well, I'm going to start already. So thanks to the fundamental interconnectedness of all things, this presentation is actually complementary to the previous one. So, well, my name is Boriss Mejías. I'm a Chilean guy working in Brussels, in Belgium. And my partner for this project, Marco Garcés, is a Portuguese guy working in Mozambique. And the other thing that we have in common is that we are both members of the Order of the Bee. So if you haven't heard about it, you can talk to me afterwards. So this presentation is really straightforward. The idea is to show you how to migrate to a PostgreSQL database, and then what can you do with it after you have migrated. Now, the example I'm going to use is Alfresco connecting to a MySQL, but it could be actually the equivalent, MariaDB, or it can be even Oracle or Microsoft SQL. So you start with your instance of Alfresco, which is connecting to a MySQL database. And the first thing that you need to do is to have a PostgreSQL with the schema of Alfresco. And to do that, instead of porting things from scratch, you let Alfresco do that. So you install your Alfresco vanilla instance with a PostgreSQL, and then after it bootstraps, you stop it, and then you take the schema, but in two parts. This is the important part. You first need to get the pre-data and then the post-data, and the dump, that is for the data you're not going to use it because the data is going to be import from your previous, or your running MySQL database, using this open source tool, which is called DB transfer. So you first inject the pre-data to get the tables and the correct types for the columns and everything, and then you use DB transfer to read from MySQL once your Alfresco is stopped at the moment, and then you write everything into the PostgreSQL. So this is really good because you don't need to fix stuff. DB transfer is going to do it for you. So you're ready with that part, and then you need to fix all the constraints and all the foreign key stuff, which is also part of the schema, and that is done with the post-data dump that you did in the beginning. But you're not done yet. Afterwards, you need to fix the ID sequences, and then you can use a script provided also for another member from the community that is going to put everything in place. And that's all the 4 steps that you need to do to go do a conversion from here to there. And now you're done. You can connect your Alfresco to your PostgreSQL and then carry on with this. This is just exactly the same as you had before with MySQL, but it's better to put another instance of PostgreSQL, which is going to be your hot standby here. And then you have the stream replication coming from the master to your slave. And this is good because it's not just, we are going to have a good backup. No, it's every transaction that you write into your PostgreSQL is going to be immediately replicated to your hot standby. So you can put a PG pool on top of it. PG pool is going to do 2 things. One is going to manage your connection pool, and it's going to allow you to have more connections even than what you can handle in your database. But it's also going to do load balancing. Why? Because every transaction is written. You can use this hot standby for read, and everything you need to do, read and write, you can do it with the master. So this is why it's complementary to the previous presentation, because you can get the load balancing on top of it, and then the load balancing at the low level. This is good, of course, for failure recovery. So when you have your master that crashes for hardware or software issues, this one, even without restarting the server, you have a revolution and the slave becomes the master. And this one can do read-write. So out of the box, you get, with a little bit of configuration and installation, stream replication, load balancing, and failure recovery with PostgreSQL. Of course, those are for a failure recovery with software and hardware, but there are some more nasty things that you can face, and that's the user that can crash something. So you're ready to go home, and 5:06, the user called you and said, I think I messed it up with the site. I deleted some users, deleted some stuff. Can you do a recovery? If you're using MySQL, you say, okay, we pick up the midnight backup, and we lose all the work of the rest of the people for the day. But no, in PostgreSQL, you can do hot backup, and you do point-in-time recovery. So you come back from the moment that they tell you that there's something wrong to your previous stable base backup, and then you start redoing transactions until you say, okay, I know that this guy messed it up here, so I don't redo this transaction, and then you come back to a stable state. This is your improvement in your recovery point objective, and this is the time you lose while you're doing the stuff. So there are 2 things that are important here in terms of contributing with other people. We would like to thank Luis Flores, the main developer from DB Transfer, who worked together with Marco to make sure that this is going to work well for Alfresco installations with the precise data types, and it's all open source, so you can use it. And I would like to thank Peter Lofgren, which is his secret name for his real name, which is Loftux. He's a god from Asgard, and his main quarters are in Valhalla. So he provided the fixed ID sequences and also the main steps in the beginning, how to start doing a migration to PostgreSQL. So the message here is give it a try, migrate to PostgreSQL, and try to take advantage of it by doing all this stuff in the back. Thank you very much.
Hi everybody, my name is Cristophe, and this is not the good one.
I apologize then. You want this one or the other mic?
Sorry, I didn't expect. So I'm going to talk about, I'm Ermanno Russo, I'm going to talk about two-factor authentication for a solution we recently developed for Alfresco Share. In this case, we are talking about two-factor authentication using a smartphone. How it works, the user chooses to set up the authentication in the user profile. Then the server will generate for him a unique secret, and it will make available to it so that the user will be able to store it in his smartphone. Yeah. After that, the application installed on the smartphone will make the user available a passcode that the user will have to type along with the other credential, username and password. The server will retrieve the secret and compute the code itself, combining with the current time. And it will check both code matches. And we check, of course, the normal user and password. So effectively, the passcode will be like a second password, but it will be provided by the smartphone, and the user will not have to remember it because it will only last 30 seconds. And if in case the device, the smartphone will be stolen, the thief won't be able to log in because he will not know the other credentials, the username and the password. So the advantage of a two-factor authentication, of course, is that the authentication is much less vulnerable to attacks like man in the middle, social engineering, or keyloggers, on anything nasty the bad guys can think of. Because even if they manage to get your credentials, after 30 seconds, the code will be outdated and they won't be able to log in, basically. So what we did for Alfresco Share is both write our own Alfresco Share customizations and choose an application, sorry, an application for our smartphone. And we chose Google Authenticator, which is a free application available for most mobile operating systems. And then we customized the user profile, adding this widget, which enable the user to enable the two-factor authentication and displays a QR code. This QR code gets scanned by Google Authenticator to retrieve the secret. So the user doesn't know the secret, only the application needs to know the secret. Then we customized the login screen. We added another field for the passcode. And of course, we wrote our custom authentication interceptor to make sure the passcode is required to log in. This way, there is no way someone can log in without typing a passcode. Yeah. In case the device gets lost, then an Alfresco administrator can temporarily disable the two-factor authentication so that the user can log in just with the password and set up the authentication on another device. We are thinking about some solutions to reduce the need of intervention of administrators. For example, we could provide user of a disposable time agnostic code that they can use only once in case they lose their device. And so to summarize, this kind of two-factor authentication is based on something you know, your password, and something you have, your smartphone. And that's it. Thank you.
Hi again. My name is Cristophe, and I'm working for Amplexor in Belgium. Yes, I'm going to talk about, we had a presentation 2 years ago about the switch between Alfresco, good old Alfresco AVM and Drupal as the front end for the alfresco.com website. We've seen that the link between Drupal and Alfresco was made through CMIS, and that the CMIS API Drupal module was used. This is the module provided by the Drupal community. The current version is 7. The module is good, but when I've tested, I was quickly frustrated by a problem. This is about authentication. You can only set up a single user on the module, a single Alfresco user for the CMS connection. And that means that it's good if you want to show public documents or non-sensitive documents. But what I wanted to do was to be connected on my Drupal website as Cristophe and be recognized in Alfresco as Cristophe and only see the document I was authorized to see. So I've started to work on a new Drupal module depending on the parent CMS API module one, and I simply wanted to use the out-of-the-box Drupal login form, asking a ticket to Alfresco, an authentication ticket to Alfresco, and store it on my Drupal module. This is what I made, and so I'm saving the ticket in the Drupal module, and I'm overriding this single user authentication in the CMS API parent module. When I want to do a call to a CMS, I'm sending role ticket string as username and the ticket as password. Using a ticket was important for me because I'm not saving any user password in the CMS Drupal module. Sorry. The Drupal module comes with an administration page where you can set your Alfresco web script URI and two other options. I'm going to speak about it in a few seconds. The first step was to override the out-of-the-box Drupal login form. I've added a validation function, a new validation function, and where I put my logic, asking a ticket and syncing the Drupal user with the Alfresco user. So it means that if the well-known Mike Jackson wants to connect through the Drupal website for the first time, a user is going to be authenticated in Alfresco, and a Drupal user node will automatically be created for him. This is important in order for your Drupal website to work good. Yep. Okay, and then you can let Alfresco work as a master. It means that you are going to try to authenticate, and Alfresco, if it's not succeed, will show you an error message. You can only choose two options. If the authentication fails, you can connect with your Drupal user only if it exists, and you can choose to use the single user configuration to have at least access to public documents, for example. A quick demo, really simple. 3 user, myself as manager, I'm manager. A Drupal user is a contributor, and the CMS is a consumer. This is the user used in the parent CMS API module. 5 documents. The 2 first one are public, 3rd and 4th one are limited to contributors maximum, and the 5th one contains sensitive information. This is for managers. And we can see that if you try to log in with your manager account, this is my manager account, in the same folder, Alfresco folder, this is a Drupal widget. You can see that you have access to all the documents. If you then try to use the contributor user, you have only access to 4 documents, and if you use the CMS user or public access, you only see the public documents. Are there alternatives? Yes, you can enable single sign-on the Alfresco side and send the credentials through HTTP headers. You can set up the Drupal CMS API module to do that. OSKD, I'm just mentioning, just for information, it's to be investigated. This is new as Drupal module, and it's about Alfresco integration. I don't know yet if it's solving any authentication problem. Thank you very much.
You good? Okay. So, hi, my name is Will Abson. I want to talk about the Alfresco API, the Alfresco Cloud API. And when you're developing against that, a tool that I've developed to allow you to play around with that. So History of this project, it was called My Alfresco Dashlet, and it started off as a dashlet that exposes some data from the cloud. It was a hackathon project at the Boston Hackathon to test a library called Share-OAuth. Now, Share-OAuth came about as a library to access social services like Twitter in a Alfresco shared dashlet. So this is where the library came from. And then I thought, well, why not apply this library to something else? So it can do gets, it can do posts, so you can take actions as well. For instance, this is another example with Twitter. If you want to retweet someone's tweet, then the library can do all of that using OAuth. Now, you may be familiar with the Alfresco public API. I'll talk about that in a minute, but that is also protected by OAuth. So if you're registered as a developer, you've got a token, you can go ahead and you can start playing with that via OAuth. This is the dashlet that was developed at the hackathon at Boston last year. So it was really very simple. It just lists the site that you have created in the Alfresco cloud, and it does that in your on-premise Alfresco, so you can see both side by side. I also developed a search extension, so that's doing a similar thing. It's going out to the Alfresco cloud when you do a search on your on-prem repo, and it's saying, we found these other documents, are these useful to you? So this is leveraging the cloud APIs. So there's two different types of API. You've got the Alfresco API, which gives you information on people and sites, and then also you've got CMIS API, which you're probably familiar with. And there's two versions of that. So in total, you've got these three APIs, and how do you choose as a developer which ones to use for which purpose? So the idea is that you can use this tool to play around with those and work out what's supported by each API. This is the user interface. You type in your API query at the top there. You see response info there on the right-hand side, how long it took, how big the response was, and then there lined up below, you see the responses parsed. This is a view of the endpoints that you've got there. So you can choose from the three APIs that I mentioned there a minute ago. You can connect to either one of those for CMIS or the Alfresco API. Now, I'm going to show a couple of examples of what you get back from the API, so you can get a flavor of each of those three APIs there. So first, we'll look at the Alfresco API. We're looking up information on the current user. So this is myself. I'm authenticated via OAuth, and I'm using that special me placeholder to return information on myself, but that could be any cloud username that I put there. I can then take that a step forward and add /sites onto the end of that. What the Alfresco API then gives me is a list of sites and objects for each of those in that entries object as an array. And I can also see, similarly, if I want to look at a particular site, I can look at the members of that site. So this is the sort of thing, this is the sort of data you get back from the Alfresco API. So you can see that data, you can get a feel for it while you're developing your application that will consume it. Now, CMIS then can be used to build upon that and access content. I've got two folders here. You've got the root folder in company home, and then there's a folder in the document library. CMIS 1.1 also has this succinct mode, which is a little bit shorter, and you've got one property for each property on the node rather than objects for each property on the node. So that makes things a lot more, well, succinct, obviously. This, just for comparison, is CMIS 1.0. Some people like XML. That looks pretty horrible to me. But you know, as a developer, that might be right for some applications. Crucially, what you want to do is you want to decide which CMIS API to use here. So this gives you an idea. These are the sort of metrics you can get out of the tool, so you can make a decision, and you might conclude from that CMIS 1.1 with succinct true is the best one. It's quick and lightweight. So we've just looked at gets. But as I mentioned earlier with Twitter, we can also do posts against the Alfresco API. This is in the latest version of the code. We can play around with that. So really, this is I like this tool. A couple of other people have found it useful for developing their own applications. You can't access these URLs directly because you need an OAuth token. So It allows you to really play around with those. There's more information on the web. That's the project's site itself. And there's also a demo that I did in Tech Talk Live back in March that Richard hosted. I think it was Jeff hosting it, in fact. Thank you. Thanks.
Excellent. I want to thank all the presenters. I'm impressed not only being able to present on a tight schedule in a foreign language or stepping in for coworkers or with your co-presenters not here. I think that all the presentations are really useful content. We will be posting the slides. Feel free to check out the resources or ask the presenters for more information. So one more round of applause.